Welcome to another episode of the Everything College Basketball Podcast, your home for the latest news and analysis from the world of college hoops. Back again are your hosts, Josh Burton, Phil Dexter, and Peyton Burton.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Everything College Basketball Podcast, episode 146. And I'm your host, Josh Burton. Joining me today is one of my teammates, Mr. Phil Dexter. Phil, we are now set for the Sweet 16. We got the first week in the NCAA Tournament behind us. Man, it feels like it's went quick. We talked a little off air. It feels like this season's went quick. It's crazy that we're already into the Sweet 16.
The season itself has gone by quick, but then I feel like we always look forward to like this very first weekend of tournament games so much more because there's just so much going on. You know, Thursday, Friday, we have 8 games each, whatever it is, and then just it slowly whittles down. And so it feels like we're already down to, our final few games of college basketball, man. It's kind of bittersweet.
It definitely is bittersweet, especially when you've watched as much and covered as much as the three of us have, Peyton included. And by the way, Peyton can't make it today, internet issues. He will be back next week. But yeah, I mean, we've watched a lot of basketball this year, and the fact that it's pretty much at its end, it is bittersweet. But before we get too much further into the whole world of college basketball, the tournament, everything else, we got to let you know that this podcast is presented in part with the House of College Hoops and House Enterprise. Head over to our site, house-enterprise.com, for more information. And as always, got to give some love to ECB's title sponsor this year, Beauty to Beast Nutrition, located in downtown Edinburgh, Indiana. It is a healthy juice bar. Stop in today. Tell them ECB sent you, get 10% off of your entire purchase. Phil, I feel like, we've joked about it when Trevor was on with us, Peyton, all of us have joked about it. It feels like every time we come on these main shows, we can't just get to the basketball. It's always got to be something. Well, this week, luckily, it's not bad news. We're going to lead off the show today with some interesting interconference turmoil, I guess you would call it. It's been speculated for weeks and weeks now, the Ed Cooley situation at Providence. We're going to talk about their final game back on Friday evening when Kentucky knocked them out of the tournament. It has been a whirlwind of questions, controversy. I mean, this is Mr. Providence. He grew up in the area. I've even heard people go as far as to say that this man could run for mayor when his coaching days are done and probably win the mayorship in Providence. He just today, as we sit here on Monday, he took the job at Georgetown, as been rumored for weeks now. Phil, it's not often that you see Big East coaches move laterally to another Big East team. It's kind of against their unspoken code of conduct. Your thoughts on him finally making it official, putting his house up for sale, moving to Georgetown, and what this does for both programs, Ed Cooley, the whole situation?
Well, first of all, I mean, I understand Providence fans maybe being a little bitter about how things were handled here. Cooley definitely didn't handle it the best way that he could have, but I also think it's tough because no matter what you do, you're never going to make anybody happy. You can't outright deny the rumors if you are in fact considering taking the job. Winning your tournament team, you can't really just take the job and abandon your team like that. So I think he was in a tough spot, and excuse me. I just think that you can't really blame Ed Cooley. You mentioned he's Mr. Providence. I think that that's really what held up this decision for so long is he had to decide if he was willing to, kind of turn his back on the city that he's from. But Georgetown is a better opportunity. I mean, financially, they're ponying up reportedly over $6 million a year, which makes him one of the highest paid coaches in the game. And I imagine Providence can't match that. And then, Providence just doesn't have the history that Georgetown has. So no offense, this is a better opportunity, and you can't fault somebody for moving on to a better opportunity, in my personal opinion.
No, you absolutely cannot. And this is one where, you hear last week that he's going to take it, and then he kind of gets cold feet and backs out, but now he's back into it. I feel like, man, you and I were both in the spaces, and I forget the guy's name. He's been really locked into the coaching changes. He kind of went over about an hour's worth on the spaces the other night, describing this whole process from insider information. And basically, once Providence got eliminated from the tournament, Georgetown, and Micah Shrewsbury comes in this as well, the head coach of Penn State. Basically, Georgetown gave Ed Cooley an ultimatum. We need a decision within the next 24 to 48 hours, or else we're going to have to move on. So I think this is probably what prompted and gave Ed a little bit of bump to go ahead and take the Georgetown spot. And this is supposedly, I think you mentioned it, this is a job that he is very interested on. If it wasn't Providence College, I think he would have been gone 2 weeks ago. But him being a Providence guy, it's a hard deal. So let's talk about the Georgetown job real quick. You know, obviously they are not Georgetown of old. They are a long ways away from being at the top of the Big East Conference, an NCAA tournament team. The recruiting's not been good. This is a tough rebuild, but we know with the transfer portal, you can change a team overnight just like that. So what do you think his perspective is going into a Georgetown job that currently, from the money situation, is better, from a historical situation is better, but from an on-product standpoint, and even really their fan base, because they don't pack that arena, what do you think that this is for him to kind of take a step back as far as basketball product goes? And how fast do you think he can turn this thing around?
Well, I think first of all, we've already seen he can be competitive in the Big East with maybe not the strongest recruiting base. And I think that at Georgetown, he has access, to a whole different level of recruit. I mean, the DMV area is just loaded with talent. So he's going to tap into that. You mentioned the the transfer portal, where he's already been pretty successful at Providence. And again, I think he'll have no problem bringing talent to Georgetown. And then I think something worth noting too is this Georgetown roster is not totally barren. I hate to shit on Patrick Ewing, but the roster's not as much of a disaster as their record would indicate. They have some dudes on that team. And if they're able to bring them back, Primo Spears is a guy who played really well this year.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a kid that you can build around. I mean, he's already produced at the Big East level. So I think they can be competitive next year, maybe not as competitive as Georgetown wants to be as far as, competing for national titles, but I think they could compete for a tournament spot next year with the transfer portal, maybe get a recruit or two. But then I think if you look at year 2, Sweet 16 wouldn't surprise me at all year 2. And I told somebody else this earlier today, but I think Final Four by year 5 is not out of the realm of possibility, just because I think Ed Cooley clearly has proven he's one of the best coaches in the game, and he's going to have more talent at Georgetown. So I don't see how things don't look up.
Completely agree with you there. You see Peyton in the live chat here. He's talking about the Georgetown's being a better job. No problem with him leaving, NIL, all that stuff. He thinks Bryce Hopkins to Georgetown would not surprise him, which actually leads me to this as well. Glad you mentioned Primo Spears. I think if you're Ed Cooley, you got to try to convince Primo to come back. I like Brandon Murray, the former LSU player. I think he's got a lot of potential that a guy like Ed Cooley could bring the best out of him. He's a bigger kind of wing guard type thing. But I know this is shady, and I know Providence people don't want to hear this because Georgetown's already taken our coach. But if you're Ed Cooley, you got to do what's best for you and your new program. Jared Bynum's in the transfer portal as of a couple hours ago. He's got obviously a lot of familiarity with Jared Bynum. I would not be surprised if Jared Bynum ends up a Hoya. I would not be surprised if Bryce Hopkins ends up a Hoya. If you could get those two from Providence, the two that we mentioned, bring Primo Spears, talk him into coming back, and Brandon Murray, that's a nice little quartet of players to build around. And obviously you got to hit the portal hard. I wouldn't be surprised to see Georgetown in for a guy like Khalif Battle from Temple, some of these other high profile transfers. But I think Cooley's the right guy, obviously, to get this Georgetown program back up and running. Plus, we've talked about this before with Georgetown. This is a culture deal. And if Ed Cooley can get in and get the fan base excited, Georgetown can start bringing in top guys, because Georgetown for a long time was looked at as kind of the black culture school, like the high major school. And I think Ed can get this thing turned around. So it's going to be very interesting watch. Providence, where did they go from here, Phil? Because we've heard guys like Kim English, Micah Shrewsbury, a couple different names. If you were Providence, their AD, who are you looking at right now to try to salvage this whole deal? Because you just lost a top 50 recruit that's supposed to come in next year. He decommitted and got out of his commitment today. So you got to hire somebody quick that excites the fan base. If you're the Providence AD, who are you targeting to bring them in quick?
Well, I just don't know financially they're going to be able to do for Shrewsbury what Penn State can, or some of the other teams that are sniffing around him, potentially Notre Dame. So Shrewsbury, I definitely would, that's somebody I would want to have, but I'm not sure they can afford it. Kim English is a weird one to me just because he hasn't had that much success yet. I'm not sure he's ready for that big step up. A guy that I would look at, and again, this would be a big step up for him, but he's had a lot of success in the Northeast already, is John Becker from Vermont. He's had a ton of success there. Again, I feel like with those Northeastern jobs, you kind of need to stay within that community of Northeastern guys. We've seen Boston College kind of try to go outside that group a few times and be unsuccessful. There's a lot of prep schools up that way. If you have connections, you can really start to recruit those areas well. So I think John Becker might be the way to go. Again, probably not a super splashy hire for the fan base, but
well, that's a great name. I seen a tweet earlier before we hopped online here and started going live. Somebody said, please give me Bobby Hurley to Providence, so that way him and his brother have to play each other twice within the conference. I mean, I know it was kind of joking, but Bobby Hurley would actually make a lot of sense in a way because his Northeast connections and all that. But
and I'm not sure if they would even consider this as well, but like Richard Pitino potentially. It wouldn't surprise me if he would want to be closer to his dad. He has kids, again, the guy you were mentioning that we were on his Twitter space is Curry Hicks Sage, his Twitter name. But he mentioned that potential that Rick Pitino might want to be closer to Richard as far as the tech job. So maybe now that Pitino or Rick has taken the St. John's job, that could go, the opposite way and see Richard sniff it around Providence if they would even be interested.
Well, that wouldn't be the worst hire because I know New Mexico missed the tournament this year, but he's done a pretty nice job rebuilding. And you'd have to think for the third stop, he would be able to bring Jamal Mashburn Jr. with him. And that's not a bad, player to lead off with. We'll have to keep an eye on the Providence deal, see what, Ed Cooley can able to pull together now for Georgetown. Interesting stuff. We got a couple more coaching news here. Let's go to Slick Rick Pitino, baby, because we've talked about him for weeks now. We kind of knew he played it off during the tournament, questions, the press conferences, saying like, I haven't been to St. John's campus in 30 years. I don't know how to get around. Everybody knew he was going to St. John's. It was a matter of probably money, control, all this. It became official today. Rick Pitino is the new head coach of the St. John's Red Storm. And I love this hire. You talking about a guy who's familiar with the Big East, who's a New York City guy, who knows the area. He's already been rumored to rehire Steve Masiello as his top assistant. These guys are going to hit the ground running. I would imagine, we talked about Cooley and the transfer portal and NIL. You also seen too, the article came out yesterday that a former St. John's alum who's a billionaire in the area has already said if they get Rick Pitino, he'll put as much money in NIL as he possibly can. They're going to have the money. It's in St. John's. The Garden will be rocking again. I think by this time next year, St. John's is an NCAA tournament team. I think we see a whole new St. John's and the rebirth of St. John's on the national stage. I think this is an A-plus hire. It's a 6-year deal. Probably Pitino's last coaching contract considering his age, but I love the hire, Phil. The Johnnies are back.
Yeah, I mean, this is the home run hire for St. John's. You pretty much mentioned everything I would have said, off the top. Obviously, he's a New York guy, but I don't think that they're going to see like that huge, talent leave that they have, because they have a lot of talent on the roster right now. I don't think that they're going to see all those guys leave, considering Pitino is probably an upgrade over Mike Anderson. And then you got a kid, like Brandon Gardner, who, we've sort of followed on Twitter over the past couple of years, was here in Raleigh, has since moved to New York, but has been committed to St. John's for a while. I think a kid like that, A, isn't decommitting, and B, he's like perfect for Rick Pitino's system. He's a kid who wants to get out and run, is super athletic. Like, he would be awesome at the 4 for Rick Pitino. So I think St. John's is going to be very, very exciting next year. The Big East in general, like, who are we looking at next year? Somebody's got to finish last. Like, obviously DePaul is probably in the basement still, but like other than that, like you don't have that guaranteed Georgetown being at the bottom. St. John's has sort of been around there. Like it's gonna be a fucking dogfight every week.
The Big East profile has raised dramatically again, and it's fun to see. And Rick's not stupid. This ain't his first trip around the sun. Him bringing Steve Masiello back as an assistant is such a huge deal. I don't think it's getting talked about enough because they have the familiarity. They've won a lot of games. Steve obviously got screwed over in Manhattan. And you don't think that these guys aren't going to target and try to keep the top New York City kids at home? I mean, look at guys like, imagine if Rick Pitino was there the last couple years. I highly doubt a guy like Marcus Noel and Jaden Atkins, who are going to be playing each other in their Sweet 16 back in the Garden this upcoming week that we'll talk about. I highly doubt that they leave the city. You give Rick Pitino and St. John's guards like that, that's what I think we're looking at here. That some of the, not every top flight New York City, inner city kid's going to stay, but if he could get a good chunk of the good ones, that's all he needs. And then sprinkle in a couple national guys here and there. He can recruit New York City and be really good every year.
You mentioned Steve Masiello too. Like I would imagine Jose Perez, who never ended up playing this season, even though he transferred to West Virginia. Like I would imagine he gets a red shirt for this year. So he's probably got one more year of eligibility. That's a guy Masiello immediately could help you bring in, who can probably start for you. And if not start, like score off the bench. Like they just have so many connections between him and his staff and just that East Coast. Like he's gonna have so much talent on that roster year in and year out. You mentioned it, like it's gonna be the Garden is gonna be fucking rocking every night. Like
gonna be rocking.
They're gonna score 80 points a game.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so fun.
They're gonna be pressing. They're gonna be running, shooting threes. The Garden's gonna be alive again, man. And I cannot wait to watch. Good hire by St. John's. Got a couple other real quick. We'll touch base real quick on the Chris Beard to Ole Miss signing became official this last week. Despite what you think about Chris Beard and all that, that's a great hire for a program like Ole Miss. We know, his off the court issues are one thing, but when we're talking strictly X's and O's and coaching, the dude has proven he can get it done. And I think this is a great hire for Ole Miss. They had to take a shot on somebody, whether it's, I don't know the word I'm looking for here, whether it's a good thing or not in your eyes, as far as a basketball coach. Ole Miss ain't getting nobody high profile. This was a great hire for him.
Yeah, it's tough for me to knock it too much. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that Chris Beard wasn't out of basketball a little longer. I thought he might have to sit out at least like next season. But I do wonder how well he's going to be able to recruit. Like transfer portal is one thing. I think he'll be able to get some veteran talent in there, but like I don't mean to overstate it too much, but you have to go sit in a kid's living room and talk to their mom as a guy who allegedly choked and bit your fiance. Like, I don't know how well that's going to go over with, 17-year-old kids and their mothers. But so he may have to rely on the transfer portal until he can kind of redeem that image a little.
I'll tell you how it's going to go. That SEC's got that fuck you money. And when he starts saying, when them boosters start giving him the cash and he tells that mom, hey, I didn't mean, that was a bad deal. That's not me. Hey, let me give your kid and $250,000 in NIL money. That mom's going to forget about all that shit more than likely.
It's blue chips all of a sudden, right? Where it's like, that tractor out in the back is looking a little fucked up. Like let's get you and your daddy a new tractor.
Yeah. No, that's a great. I love that movie, man. We need to do a summer show just on Blue Chips.
We should do a Blue Chips watch along. That's one of my favorites for sure.
I love that movie. But the other piece of news, we kind of wondered where he'd end up, but it became official today that Mike Bray's the new head coach of South Florida. A little surprising to me. I thought he would end up with another like power conference job, but he gets to go hang out down south and nice weather, low expectations. Mike Bray, I don't know if they'll make the tournament. They might every 2 or 3 years because I don't know how he's going to get talent down there. But Mike Bray can go retire down somewhere nice where there's no state income tax and try to still coach basketball and see how he does, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I know his son's not involved with the basketball program at IMG, but his son is a football coach at IMG. So I'm wondering if maybe those connections could help him recruit that area a little bit, bring some talent into South Florida. But you mentioned it. I like this isn't a knock on Mike Brey. I think this is more of just sort of a retirement run. Like I'm not expecting a ton of success. I don't think it's going to be a dumpster fire by any means. I think he'll bring in more talent than they've been getting. And Brian Gregory, I mean, honestly, it can't get much worse than it's been with him there. But I don't see them like turning into this power in South Florida by any means.
And one last one, it just popped in my mind. Damon Stoudemire to Georgia Tech. I love that hire. I think that's a dude in Georgia Tech. I've kind of considered him a sleeping giant because they're in the Atlanta area. They're in a power conference. I think he can get recruits because he's kind of modern. He has that NBA connections. I think Georgia Tech over the next 4 or 5 years, if he can coach a lick, I think Georgia Tech could be a perennial tournament type team every year.
I agree. That's traditionally always kind of been I don't want to say a great job, but a good job. They've been a team that's been to Final Fours, not quite been able to pull off national titles. But yeah, I think Damon Stoudemire could be great there. You mentioned he's a younger guy too, which I think is important these days. You have to have a coach who can sort of, relate to these kids, especially, we're seeing guys like Tom Izzo, people like that coming out and talking about how they don't agree with NIL and all this player empowerment stuff. Like, even if you don't agree with it, you have to see the landscape changing. And so I think Damon Stoudemire will be a perfect fit. You mentioned all the NBA connections. I think supposedly he has some connections to the Atlanta area too. So if he's able to capitalize on that, that's one of the most talent-rich areas in the country as far as like AAU basketball goes. So he'll be great.
And if the ACC, you don't think historically they're going to have another down year, but if they continue to be down, that's a conference year in and year out right now that's there for the taking. So interesting. Peyton asked, I'll pull it up right now. Peyton wants me to ask you who has the better coaches since we have all these new hires, the Big 12, the SEC, or the Big East. 3 extremely loaded conferences as far as quality coaches go.
Oh man, that's tough. That's tough. Might have to go overall SEC still, I think. Probably like top to bottom between like coaches and their entire resumes. Because I think still at the bottom of the Big East, you're still a little weak with guys like, no offense to Tony Stubblefield. Even Kyle Neptune at this point hasn't really proven a whole lot. Big 12 is probably right up there. But yeah, I go SEC.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, you add Chris Beard, you've got Barnes, you've got Cal, you've got Muss and Nate Oates, and you got Buzz Williams. You got a lot of great ones.
Jerry
top
Stackhouse,
to bottom.
Up and coming guy.
So there's a lot of really good coaches. Chris Jans just made the tournament. So yeah, I would say SEC slightly over the Big 12, but the Big East is getting up there. So great question. Peyton, we will get to the Louisville talk here in a little bit. I promise you I got something on him, but we got to move on to the tournament. We spent the first 22 minutes here talking coaching changes. Phil, the first week in the tournament, especially that Thursday, is the best day in our sport by far. That Thursday, you got the anticipation, you're ready to go. In this year's tournament, I feel like last year, it wasn't disappointing, but we didn't have the upsets outside of St. Peter's that we're kind of, I guess, got spoiled by. This year, baby, this was historic. And let's start with the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history. I know it's the second time this has ever happened, but in my opinion, this is bigger than the one of Baltimore County knocking off Virginia. Virginia didn't have DeAndre Hunter, arguably their best player for that game. So there's kind of an excuse there. Purdue was fully healthy. They're the Big Ten regular season and conference tournament champs. They have the National Player of the Year in Zach Edey. And you're talking about a team that is on average height, the biggest in college basketball, going against the smallest in average height, and a team that had to win in Dayton in a play-in game. You're talking about Fairleigh Dickinson, Phil, a team that shouldn't even been in the NCAA tournament, had the stupid rule not existed. Merrimack should have been representing them. This is a monumental upset, and Purdue fans talked all that shit to us this year. This is the time that we're going to give it all back to you because this was historic, but in all the wrong ways, Phil. Talk to us about that Fairleigh Dickinson out calling their shot. Tobin Anderson called his shot in Dayton.
He did, man. He did.
And it came to fruition. Talk to us about this upset because this is special, man.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it. It was like literally, and Peyton put it in the comments here too, but like David versus Goliath. They're the smallest team in college basketball. You're playing against the largest team in college basketball. Zach Edey's like the biggest guy in college basketball, the most dominant player. But this was sort of the recipe that we thought could give Purdue some issues. You know, you pressure those guards. We've seen it throughout the year that they've sort of wilted under that pressure. They've struggled with turnovers. They've struggled to shoot the ball really since January on. So, well, obviously it was shocking. I don't think if anybody tells you that they thought Fairleigh Dickinson was going to win this game, like realistically, they're kind of lying to you, I think. But just we saw this coming from a stylistic standpoint, I think, months ago.
No, you're absolutely right. And we talked about it. Tobin Anderson called a shot after they win their play-in game. He will let it. He did it on purpose. He was talking to his team, but he let the cameras know because he knew they were in there. He told his team, he said, "I've watched a lot of tape on Purdue. I'm telling you, we can beat these guys." And they went out. They pressed nonstop. They got after the Purdue freshman guards. And they did wonderful in their weak side ball rotations on Zach Edey. Edey rarely got a clean look. He did finish with 21 points. He had, 15 rebounds. But, man, you look at Braden Smith, 7 turnovers in this ball game. He cannot handle the pressure. And I know he's a freshman, but, man, you got to be able to handle the pressure against Fairleigh Dickinson. Like, you got the height advantage. You got to be able to handle the pressure, Phil.
I think you're the one who mentioned it last week, Josh, too, that when these tight games between really highly favored teams get down to the end, the pressure's on the higher seeded team. And you saw that in this game. You know, Purdue went 5 minutes down the stretch, I think, from like the 5-minute mark to like the 30-second mark or something like that without scoring. Like you could see them kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, puckering up a little bit. Like,
no, you're right.
And you, like you said, you mentioned the turnover, but you could literally see it. And I just think we'll talk about obviously the Arizona game as well, because you could see it there too. But coming down the stretch, you know, as the higher seeded team, the pressure's all on you. And Purdue just absolutely folded.
Purdue 16 turnovers in this game. Fairleigh Dickinson played a fairly clean game for them, 9 turnovers. And also, if I'd have told you that they upset Purdue in this fashion and only go 7 of 23 from the three-point line for 30%, there's no way in hell that anybody would have bought that. But Sean Moore was outstanding this game, 19 points. He hit the dagger with, I think it was a minute to go, 45 seconds to go. Pulled Edey away from the rim on a ball rotation, knocks down the top of the key 3 there, and really put the dagger in Purdue's heart. If you're Purdue, you had this great regular season. You kind of sputtered at the end, and it ends like this. If you are a Purdue fan, how are you feeling as a whole about this season? Because this is the second year in a row where you have a mostly favorable bracket in your favor, a chance to really break that Final Four curse since 1980, and you shit the bed yet again. If you're a Purdue fan, man, how are you feeling this Monday?
I mean, you have to be feeling like something has to change, again, stylistically. Like playing through a big guy, like relying on him that much is obviously not going to work in tournament time. Again, Peyton mentioned down here that just guard play. We've talked about it, you know, on the podcast last week. Guards win in March. And they just, you know, even when they've had great guards though with Ivy, they haven't won. So it's hard to say it's even that. Like, is this a Matt Painter problem? I put the question to you. Is it a Painter problem? Is it a talent problem? Is it a style problem? Like, because they've lost in different ways with different types of teams too, which is the weird thing.
I think it's anytime it's like this, I think it's a combination because I'm not buying, and obviously our Facebook group lit up, mostly Indiana fans talking their shit about Painter. Guys, we got to stop putting so much emphasis on the tournament success because this shit is so hard and so random. Now, should they have lost to Fairleigh Dickinson? Absolutely not. Should they lost St. Peter's last year? Absolutely not. Matt Painter is a really good basketball coach. But I think the problem, and I want to give credit, and I don't remember where I heard this from, but it's a great point. I think it was Terrence Oglesby, actually, from Field of 68. I think it is a style problem inside the Big Ten itself because Matt Painter gets these bigs. He loves these big guys. That's fine. And you're used to in-conference play of playing teams that play the same way every time. You get the same whistles every year in the Big Ten. You're allowed to mug. You're allowed to be physical. Every team in the Big Ten basically wants to slow it down, except for Penn State, who still slows it down and shoots threes. But you see the same style every year. So when you get to March and the game's reffed a little different and you run up to these teams that are playing fast and loose and modern, your style is in real trouble if you don't build a cushion early. So I think that it is very much a subsequent thing of the Big Ten style as opposed to as much as it is a Purdue problem. I think something has to change, though. I think Painter does need to get a little bit more modern. I think he does need to spread the floor out a little bit more. You can still have your big 7-footers, but I think he has to get more versatile shooting and scoring options. And I think the Big Ten as a whole has to change. You can play physical, but you can also play fast and loose and more modern. But I think overall the Big Ten style is hurting a lot of teams, and Purdue just so happens to be the biggest casualty right now.
Well, I think one thing that's important to mention too, because like the St. Peter's loss has gotten held against them a lot from last year too. They weren't the ones that got upset in the first round by St. Peter's. Like, not to rub it in, Josh, because I know you're
No, you're good. You're right.
That happened in the Sweet 16. So like if you make it to the Sweet 16, it's a fucking, it's a dart throw at that point. Like, so I have a hard time really holding that one against them too much. But, outside of that, I think they lost to a 13 the year prior. Like, there's definitely something going on. And you mentioned it, the Big Ten as a whole isn't having tournament success. I mean, no national title since 2000. I don't even know the Final Four numbers, but how many teams are left from the Big Ten now? Do we even have one in the Sweet 16?
Michigan State.
Yeah.
Michigan State is the last team left.
And they're kind of a team, just the way that Tom Izzo tends to recruit, that is better suited for tournament play because they adapt to Big Ten style of basketball, but they tend to be a more athletic team, more physical, not so much of a shooting team. So it doesn't surprise me that they're the team that's left.
Well, and Michigan State and Purdue played a good non-con schedule this year. Wins over Duke, wins over Gonzaga, Marquette. But they haven't played that style since December. Like Michigan State, Tom Izzo, the thing we all love about him is he don't give a shit. They will play anybody, anywhere, anytime. So his teams get to see a variety of different styles. I think Purdue scheduling from here on out needs to find teams that will play more modern basketball. I think the Big Ten, though, it's going to take a coach like Rick Pitino to come in that league and change everything around. You need a coach that comes in, plays modern basketball, presses, runs, spreads the floor, has success with it, more importantly, for 2 or 3 years. And then I think you'll see the Big Ten adapt. But until then, I don't know.
I mean, he doesn't have the cachet that Rick Pitino has, but Brad Underwood was supposed to be that guy when Illinois hired him. I mean, that was what the fan base was sold on as far as like, the style that he had played previously and what he wanted to bring there is like, I don't give a fuck how the Big Ten plays. Like, we're going to press, we're going to play high scoring basketball. And it just, he tried that for a little while. It didn't really work, but he never really committed to it either. And then, now here we are.
It's about like politicians where when they're trying to campaign to get your vote, they're all about, we're going to do this and we're going to come in and shake up the landscape. And they're going to, and then they get elected. And they try it for a minute, and then they realize, they're kind of fighting a losing battle here. So they adapt and fall in line. I think this is what happens with the Big Ten, and I think officiating has to change. Start calling the muggings. Start calling the muggings so teams, when they hit to the tournament, are used to it.
Well, I think a guy like Micah Shrewsbury, if he ends up being at Penn State long enough, can be the guy who maybe kind of changes things a little bit because you're going to have to be at a spot that has patience because, you're not going to come in with that style and just instantly win 25 games in the Big Ten. It's going to be a slow burn. But, I think Penn State's kind of already on their way there. And if he continues to, pick up that pace, be this team that just jacks a ton of threes, maybe he's that guy. Because, like I said, Penn State maybe is going to have that patience with him as well, where they're not – if he misses a tournament here or there, nobody's, lighting the torches.
No, I'm with you there. But Fairleigh Dickinson is the upset of all upsets, knocks out number 1 seeded Purdue, 63-58. You mentioned the Arizona deal. They've become the first team to lose the 2 15 seeded teams in their program's history. They go down to 15 seed Princeton, 59-55. Arizona was a team everybody loved all year. You mentioned on the tournament show last week that they were your national champs, or at least in the national title game picture. their size, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, their guard play shit the bed in this one as well. Talk to us about Princeton's big-time upset. And, hey, how about the old school Princeton system coming back and winning a ball game?
Yeah, I had Arizona as my national champion. I didn't expect really anybody in this tournament to be able to hold them to 55 points, let alone Princeton. I thought they would just absolutely have their way with them. But like I talked about in that Purdue game, Arizona goes the final 4 minutes and 21 seconds of this game without a bucket. Like, you just completely seen them tighten up at the end of the game. That final possession, they had basically 3 opportunities to get a good shot and didn't get a single decent shot off. Like, they just folded under the pressure, for lack of a better term. You mentioned the guard play. We haven't seen their guards really play well together or overall as a group since December? I mean, it's really been since Maui. They as soon as they got into conference play, the Pac-12 did that little thing like the Big Ten does, where they have the 2 conference games in the middle of non-conference. They lost one of those and were never the same team the rest of the year.
I completely agree. You look at Arizona's bench play too. They played 8 guys. They got 7 points from bench play. Azuolas Tubelis did what he did all year. He had 22 points in this ball game, 9 rebounds. Omar Ballo, 13 points. He had 12 rebounds. 12 rebounds, and Tubelis had 5. I was looking at that wrong. But still, 13 and 12 for Ballo, 22 and 5 for Tubelis. Their bigs did the deal, but Courtney Ramey, 8 points. Kirk Kriisa, 3 points. That's a guy that we finger pointed at, that you talk about. Maui looked incredible against Creighton and all the other teams like that. But he has not been the same since really the Indiana game back when they beat them in Las Vegas. Kirk Kriisa's up and down play killed them the rest of the year and stopped them from reaching their potential. He goes 1 of 7 from the field, the lone 3-pointer he hit. But you got to give a lot of credit to Princeton. Undersized in this game, and I cannot pronounce his name. Evubuwale, I think is how you say it. I don't know how to say it, but 15 points to lead the way. Princeton just carved Arizona up. Like, Arizona had no answer for Princeton's constant motion, back cutting, picking and popping for threes. This was an incredible performance by Princeton. Again, not shooting the ball particularly well. 4 of 25 from the 3-point line and still pulled the upset. I think this says a lot about teams who are sound defensively, who are locked in offensively, and don't make a lot of mistakes. That's the teams that we've seen win tournament games so far.
Yeah, no, that was literally the one point I wanted to make before we finished up with this game, is like, usually the recipe for a mid-major to win, especially like a mid-major who's undersized like they were, is to just hit a ton of threes. And they go 4 for 25 in this game, shoot 16% from 3, but only shot 40% overall. They took care of the ball okay, but they still had 11 turnovers. Like, this game was, I don't want to take anything away from Princeton, but like, Arizona should have had every opportunity to blow Princeton out in this game the way Princeton played. And so even more credit to Princeton for like not playing their best game and still managing to find a way to win. Like, they were unbelievable defensively. You mentioned it. Like, they maybe didn't shoot the ball well, but they were getting easy buckets when they needed them. So ton of credit to Princeton. And then obviously they end up advancing to the Sweet 16 as well. So,
and Princeton tucked the lead back for the final time with like a minute to go. It maybe even less than that. They hit a little runner right in front of the rim there to give them the lead back for good. So they held tight. Like you've mentioned that I said last week, these games for the upsets, the teams that trying to pull the upset just need to be there, the final TV timeout. And you see time and time again, the team that's supposed to win tightens up. The team that's supposed to lose plays fast and free, and we get it again. Let's go to the upset that started the whole tournament off. It was the second game.
That's the one I wanted to go to when you said tightens up. I was like, yep, we got another example.
Yeah, this is the one. We all predicted it. When we did the tournament show last Monday, we all predicted and said this is a very real possibility. This was the second game of the tournament. It tipped off. We had a great Maryland-West Virginia game that just finished. And then if people watching that could switch over and watch this Furman-Virginia game, Phil, I can't even do it justice. Tell the people what happened at the end and how we got to a Furman upset over Virginia 68-67, because I don't even know in your wildest dreams if you could draw this up how it happened.
Yeah, so Furman's down 2. Virginia has the ball, and you're assuming that they're gonna, obviously end up having to foul and just hope on missed free throws. But I think there's about maybe 10 seconds left when Virginia's inbounding here, and Kihei Clark gets the inbounds and gets kind of cornered, and they have a timeout. I'm sure it was communicated during the stoppage of play right before the inbounds that they had one, and he just has this complete brain fart and heaves the ball into the air.
It was
Furman
just a
forward
fuck it, he's
catches it
there
at half
throw.
court
Yeah.
and then makes the pass, and they drain a 3. Not quite a buzzer beater, but essentially, for all intents and purposes, a buzzer beater to win the game by 1. And again, just Virginia tightened up down the stretch. Same sort of situation as the Arizona Princeton game too, where like Furman didn't play their best game. Furman didn't shoot the ball well for the vast majority of this game. There was a stretch where like Furman could not dribble the ball. Like they were dribbling it off their own foot. They had 3 straight turnovers at like a crucial stretch of the game where Virginia should have put it out of reach and just couldn't. Like you've really seen the struggles of Virginia's offense bite them in the ass. And this one, they had a really hot start, but at the finish, they just could not buy a bucket.
This is a very fun basketball game. As you mentioned, neither team in particular shot the ball well. But how crazy, and you see it on the screen if you're watching us live, Peyton says, I feel for Kihei. You got a guy, a young man, who at the beginning of his career wins a national title for Virginia in an Elite Eight game by making the pass that set up the shot to go to overtime, or else they get beaten Elite Eight and Purdue moves on to the Final Four. Now he ends his career with a pass that'll live in infamy. This is a fifth-year dude who, as you mentioned, had a timeout in pocket and got trapped and panicked and tried to throw it. I guess he saw the 2 Virginia guys way down court, but he just threw it up in the air, and Furman intercepted about half court, 1 pass, JP Pegues, bam, 3-point shot, and that's all she wrote. What an incredible turn of events, and I felt so good for Furman as well. As much as I feel bad for Kihei Clark, I felt great for Furman. You know our love for the SoCon. We predicted this. We told you guys that Furman stylistically was a great matchup for them against Virginia, and it didn't look good there, that final 30 seconds, 10 seconds, but they were able to pull this out in one of the all-time tournament classics. We'll see that final 10 seconds on all the highlight reels, the one shining moment. And to have the nerve of Pegues, Phil, he's not shooting the ball well prior to that, but to hit the shot that matters. What kind of iron, ice-cold veins did that take to take and make that shot for the game winner to get a tournament victory over a program like Virginia? That's got to be an incredible feeling.
Well, I almost feel like the way that the play happened kind of helped him because it was such a bang bang thing where like I don't even think he was expecting to have his ball the ball in his hands. So like he didn't even have time to think about any of that stuff. It was literally just like holy shit, I'm wide open. And he was a good like 2 feet behind the 3-point line too. Like he banged that fucking thing. But not to rub this in on Kihei Clark too, but he missed a really crucial free throw with like 19 seconds to go too. Like he just wasn't good in this game overall. I think he finished with like 5 points, but
and it would have put him up 4. That's a great point to even set that up. If he hits both free throws, because he went 1 of 2, he hits both free throws, that puts him up 4. That 3-pointer only cuts it down to 1 or whatever it was. So yeah, just not good for Kihei. You feel bad for him. Furman, we said they didn't shoot great. They ended up going 10 of 28 from the 3-point line, 35.7%. They hit enough that mattered. Virginia goes 2 of 12. Just the lack of offense really killed them. And Peyton brings up a good point. Furman switched they got back in the game after being down double digits. They went to that 1-3-1 zone, and it got them back in, which is a smart call because if you're playing a team that doesn't score the basketball that efficient, make them work for a shot. And I think Bob Ritchie did a tremendous, what a great job he's done at Furman.
Absolutely. I'm a huge Bob Ritchie guy. I imagine, he'll be getting some calls about some of these coaching jobs that are open, I would think. Especially, I think the one thing that was holding him back was like a lack of tournament success. And now that he's been there and won a game, you can't really hold that over his head too much. So, but big game for Jalen Slauson as well. He had kind of a rough start, but he ends up with 19 points, 6 for 7 from the line, has 10 rebounds. He ended up kind of being not necessarily like the deciding factor, but like I said, he was really bad to start the game, and so him turning it around kind of coincided with them turning it around.
No, you're absolutely right. And Bothwell played okay. He wasn't great, but just a great performance, a wild ending. Got the tournament started off in right fashion. But Phil, looking back at the first round as a whole, we had a lot of really close games, especially on Thursday. Friday night was there were some good ones, but a little bit more spacing. It seems to what happened in this tournament. Looking back at the first round, though, some games that you want to talk about that you found interesting for whatever reason. I'll let you roll with it. What game do you want to go to?
San Diego State Charleston was another one that I thought was, a dogfight down to the very end. Charleston honestly looked like they were probably going to pull off the upset for a good portion of that game. And then San Diego State, in a sign of things to come in the second round, just sort of choked the life out of them at the end of the game. They weren't able to shoot the ball well. I really like the San Diego State team. I think they're going to give Alabama some problems in the Sweet 16. Like they're a tough team to play against. They go 9 guys deep. I don't know what you thought about that game. I was very impressed with Charleston as well. I hadn't got a ton of chances to see them this year. Obviously, got a chance to talk to Pat Kelsey earlier this year, but was very impressed with them. Dalton Bolin is like I mentioned during the game while I was watching it, is like he's that dude who like is the least talented player on the floor, but just tries so much fucking harder than everybody else, and just he's in every single play.
No, I'm with you. I thought Charleston was super impressive. And I think to your point, San Diego State, when it was time to clamp up defensively, they were just bigger and more physical than Charleston. And Charleston just kind of ran out of gas. They haven't seen that type of defensive physicality. The CAA was really good this year, but it wasn't that type of physicality. Matt Bradley is tremendous. He is so good. And you see it in the second round, when they put a clinic on Furman. San Diego State's defense won them this game. But, Charleston, I thought, had an incredible showing. Very close game. Speaking of another close game, Peyton wants us to talk about it. This one was a toss-up for all of us here when we were debating this game. It was an 8-9 matchup. The winner was going to go on to play FDU after their upset. FAU comes out in the victorious 66-65 in the 8-9 matchup over Memphis. And this one got crazy. Memphis had this game in the bag. All they had to do was take care of the basketball, go to the line, hit their free throws, ball game. Instead, they're up, I guess it'd be 65-64 late in the game, like 15 seconds to go or whatever. Kendrick Davis, their best player, who had an incredible game, gets trapped, breaks the trap, and tries to throw a pass to who I think it was Alex Lomax in the middle of the court. And the FAU defender was just standing there, picked it off. It leads to an FAU layup, basically the game winner. Memphis didn't even get a shot off to end the game. FAU 66, Memphis 65. That is a heartbreak city for Memphis, who had that in the bag, and your best player, who's been incredible all year. The one bad mistake he makes all year is the most costly. Talk to us about this game, because this was incredible theater, the final 30 seconds.
Yeah, totally nuts. I'm really happy for FAU that they ended up pulling off the upset, and then obviously ran into Fairleigh Dickinson in the second round, who plays a very similar style to them. So that was a game that was just very fun. But yeah, you mentioned the game winner. Nicholas Boyd hits a tough layup, 2.5 seconds to go. Penny was obviously very frustrated. He thought they had gotten the timeout there on that Kendrick Davis turnover that you mentioned.
I forgot to mention that was a timeout over and over, and they got screwed. They got screwed bad on that one.
Yeah, no, I agree. It did. It looked like he got it, but you know what? You gotta play until the whistle. And they didn't get the whistle there. And Peyton mentioned it. I was going to mention it too, but I felt bad for Penny's water bottle there at the end. He chucked that thing. But and Penny was actually, he was not in good spirits, but he was a good sport after the game and just mentioned that, it was a great shot that beat him, how tough it was that they hang their hat on defense to kind of lose on a layup like that. But probably, maybe, would you say the game of the first round? I mean, it's probably between that and Furman and Virginia as far as just like theater. And then, I guess Furman, Virginia maybe had the upset aspect to it as well, which gives it the edge. But
No, I'm with you. I think that was more. It was definitely up there. If it wasn't, it was definitely up there. And we knew it'd be close. We knew that's why it was such a toss up between all of us when we did our show last week, because it could have gone either way, as most 8-9 games are prone to do. And the fact that your best player makes the one mistake all year that he probably makes, and it ends up being the most costly. I just can't figure out what he was trying to do, because he had the defense beat. He could have brought the ball up the floor. Like, he was going to bring the ball up the floor, get fouled, go to the foul line, ice the game more than likely, or at least make it really hard on FAU. And he just, kind of like Kia Clark, just laughs it. Just laugh. I mean, the tournament brings out the weirdest shit, I swear. Like, it brings out the weirdest shit in people. Couple of the other first-round games, Phil. The Big Ten, Indiana gets wins. You know, Iowa, I continue my rule. No offense to Iowa people, but do not trust Iowa in the NCAA tournament. Don't care how good at the end of the regular season they look. Don't trust them. Auburn
and they don't play a style that is conducive to winning in the tournament. They can't fucking play a lick of defense. I don't know if Fran McCaffrey just doesn't coach it, but for every single year he's been at Iowa, they don't play any defense.
No, and you're playing in Auburn's backyard in Birmingham. You were against basically a road crowd, and we keep talking about it. These tournament rims are tight as hell. Like, you're not getting the rolls you would at normal arenas, your home arena or wherever. So strictly 3-point shooting teams do not have the success a lot of people think that they should or probably do in reality. That's why I don't trust Iowa. But Auburn, great win. I thought Wendell Green and Katie Johnson were fucking phenomenal in this game. Johnny Broome locked down Iowa's interior play. I thought Auburn was really good. Phil, unfortunately, we got to talk about your boys. I love this game. Arkansas, Illinois, another high-profile game. Arkansas pulls out and gets the win. Let's hear it. I know you said this was the most frustrating team to me today when we were talking about this that you've seen in Illinois from a while. So let's talk it out a little bit. Arkansas gets the win. That in itself is not surprising, but I guess I expected a little bit more out of Illinois in this game.
Yeah, I mean, in a way I did, and in a way I didn't, just because when they've been bad, they've been really bad. And then typically in Underwood's tenure, those kind of, bad moments have also coincided with them being in the tournament. I mean, haven't made it past the first weekend with him as the coach. Honestly, we haven't made it past the first weekend since we went to the national title game in 2005. So it's more than just him. But this game, Illinois had like one little run where they were competitive. Arkansas got off to a really hot start, jumped out to a double-digit lead. Illinois was able to whittle it down kind of late in the first half, early in the second half. But Arkansas just kind of, I don't want to say blew it back open, but got it back above 10. And it was never really in question. Arkansas had them at arm's length the whole time. And Arkansas looked like the more talented team. They looked like the team that, was preseason rated top 10. And this was just the story of Illinois' year, just not able to capitalize on any of their opportunities. As talented as any team in the country, but you mentioned it when we were texting earlier. We're going to eulogize our teams, and I said I'm happy this team is dead, because they were so. That's my eulogy for 22-23 Illinois basketball. I'm happy this team is dead, because it was just. Their highs were so high, and that's what made the lows so frustrating, because you've seen the games against teams like UCLA where it's like we can compete against anybody when we're defending, when we're taking care of the ball, when we're not doing stupid bullshit, when Brad Underwood's not acting like a prick. Like, we can compete at the highest level, and it's just none of those things came together this year, unfortunately.
Well, you want to summarize Coleman Hawkins' season? I think this game is a great summary. 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, 6 turnovers. That was him in a nutshell. He would do so many good things right, and then you'd look at the box score and he'd have 5, 6, 7 turnovers, and then he'd take bad shots, and then he'd come back with a 30-point game. I think this game perfectly sums up Coleman Hawkins' 2022-2023 campaign. Illinois as a whole in this game, 17 turnovers. As you mentioned, though, I mean, Arkansas they were on point. Their defense, they are the best pickpocketing, handsy, when on drive defense I've seen all year. They're not the best defense, but they're the best at stripping the ball, poking the ball free. We knew that coming in. And I thought Arkansas, and when it gets tournament time, Musselman can scheme and design his way to victories. And I think that's what we've seen here.
And
So
one thing you just mentioned about Arkansas, the way they like get after the ball, though, I do think is a disadvantage sometimes, depending on how the referees call the game. Because like we seen in Maui, playing that style got them in a lot of trouble and a lot of foul trouble. So I that definitely can help them. I just think it depends on what stylistically the referees are kind of calling.
no, and that's a very good point. But we've seen in this tournament, the refs aren't going to call a whole lot. Speaking of which, let's go rapid fire some other games real quick. Houston was in a dogfight with Northern Kentucky. It looked like we were going to have 2 16s over a 1. Houston found a way the last 4 minutes, kind of cut off Northern Kentucky's 3-point shooting, was able to survive. That Duke game, we talked about it.
That's the one I wanted to talk about.
Man, Oral Roberts was better in that showing, but Duke looked fucking phenomenal again. They were up 15-0.
The defense was it was exactly what I thought would give Oral Roberts problems, because Duke's defense has so much length that they're able to throw at you. And so even with a guy like Vanover, like Derek Lively can, he can close out on his shots. Like, yeah, I was so impressed with them defensively in that game.
Just outstanding. Duke looked like world beaters. We'll get to them here in just a second. Other ones, anticipated game, Penn State beats the dog shit out of Texas A&M 76-59 in the 10-7 matchup. They go 13 of 22 from 3.
Andrew Funk, like 6 for 8, 8 for 8, something like that.
He was feeling it, son. He went 8 of 10.
8 of 10, yeah.
The rim was an ocean, and there was nothing A&M could do. Penn State spread them out, dribble past them. Jalen Pickett did his Mark Jackson impersonation, backing down, old school back down. And then if you collapsed on him, they had shooters all around. That was Penn State in a nutshell.
I wish I could remember who mentioned it, but Texas A&M, there's one team every year who we talk about as like this team who got fucked and is underseeded and all this stuff, and then they end up just getting the tar beat out of them. And I think that was Texas A&M. Like, we were all so worried about how they should have been seeded higher, and then it turns out like, yeah, Penn State was a really bad matchup for them.
Yeah. They still kind of got screwed, because if you give them a 6 seed, now they don't have to play that style. But Penn State looked freaking amazing in that game. Real quick, I'll let you touch on it just real quick. Kentucky got their first tournament win in 1,400 some days, beating Providence in a very physical, ugly game. I thought the Cats looked real good in this game. Oscar Tshiebwe, 25 rebounds, 8 points, 25 boards. I thought Jacob Toppin was phenomenal. Antonio Reeves goes for, I think it's 21 points in this game. This stylistically, when we talked about it, Providence fit to how Kentucky needs to play. And I thought Kentucky, I wouldn't say bullied them, but they did beat them on the rebound margin by 19 rebounds. And I thought Kentucky imposed their will and looked really good in this game.
No, this is exactly what I thought would happen. I mean, I didn't really think that Providence was going to have an answer for Oscar down low. And, Oscar didn't score super effectively. I think he only had 8 points. Yeah, 8 points, but 25 boards. You mentioned it. 11 offensive rebounds. I mean, he just he dominated the game without having to score in double digits. Jacob Toppin was really, really good in this game, which we had talked about last week, that matchup between him and Bryce Hopkins, who would come out on top of that, and Toppin sort of did. And this game sort of went exactly how I thought it would go. I didn't think Kentucky was amazing. I kind of thought they would win by more. It was a little bit ugly, but they just physically dominated. I mean, the 8-point differential to me was a little misleading.
Well, and what we talk about, Bryce Hopkins, revenge game, all this other shit. It doesn't matter, because these very, very rarely go well for the team or the player who thinks that it's a revenge game. He tried too hard. He didn't get off. Toppin was a big reason for that, but he was not his typical self. Even some of the cleaner looks he got did not hit him. And then the play of the game was he went for a dunk. Toppin met him at the rim, blocked him, led to a fast break. Antonio Reeves 3. That was the story of the game. So Kentucky got a much-needed win. We'll talk about them in just a second again, because they probably played the game of the tournament. But anything else from that first round you want to talk about, touch on real quick before we move on?
No, I'm ready to get into that Kentucky K-State game like you just mentioned.
Well, let's get into it. The Cats end up meeting the other Wildcats, Kansas State, and they played the game of the tournament, I think. Kansas State wins 75-69. It was a back-and-forth affair. Kentucky jumped them early, got up to like a 15-7 lead, looked really good despite not hitting shots. And by the way, this Greensboro site sucked. The rims, on Thursday night, on Friday night, Iowa State played there. The rim was messed up. They didn't get to do much of a shoot around because they were fixing the rims. It happened to Kentucky Friday night. Providence got a shoot around while Kentucky had to wait on another rim change. Then you go to yesterday on Sunday, more issues. The court's slippery. The backboards and rims were as messed up as I've ever seen at a tournament site. That building for that arena for the tournament games was awful. But Kansas State wins this game large in part because Kentucky had 16 turnovers, 11 in the first half, and Marquise Noel was the best player on the floor, bar none. He made incredible plays, and Kansas State, 0 of 12 in the first half from three-point line, still didn't really shoot the ball that well, but hit 3 big shots down the stretch. Every time Kentucky had a 4-point lead, Marcus Noel comes down, buries a 3 with Kason Wallace literally in his grill piece. Then they get the lead, and then who was it? Was it Masood? Yeah, Masood hits a dagger over by Jerome Tang, so it's like a 30-footer. And then the play that sealed the deal for Kansas State, Keontae Johnson did not really score well, was pretty much lock and key in this game. Shot clock again. Jacob Toppin in his grill piece again. He hits a step back 3 for the dagger. It came down to Kansas State made plays, Kentucky didn't. I want to hear your thoughts on it because it was an incredible game.
Yeah, I mean, the key kind of in the game, honestly, was Antonio Reeves and how, you talked about how good he was in their first round game against Providence. Complete opposite in this game. Only 5 points, goes 1 for 15, 1 for 10 from the 3-point line. And those 5 points, I think, all came in the final minute, if I'm not mistaken. He was
final
scoreless.
Like 30 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, he was scoreless until way down to the end. And like at a certain point, you just have to stop shooting the ball. You can't go 1 for 10 from 3. But Kentucky, I think it just bit them a little bit down the stretch, not having the same kind of depth that Kansas State had. Kansas State was only playing 7 guys, but it's still better than Kentucky really only played 6. I mean, Lance Ware played 9 minutes, but wasn't out there a whole lot. Damian Collins was only out there for 3. CJ Frederick played a little bit, but like Kentucky got nothing out of the bench. Oscar was again awesome. I texted you like 5-10 minutes of the game, and I was like, I think Oscar might have 30 rebounds today. Like he was
on pace,
grabbing everything. He was so good. But yeah, you mentioned a game of the tournament. It ended up being Marquise Noel's show at the end of the game. Naquan Tomlin, I texted you guys also about during the game, was just all over the place, doing everything in this one. He was able to hit a couple threes, had some dunks in transition, was blocking shots, getting steals. Like he was fucking everywhere. Very impressed with Kansas State. Jerome Tang made a comment after the game I thought was kind of weird, where he was like, we just have the dudes, like all the credit goes to my players. It comes down to having dudes. And I'm like, well, if it just comes down to having dudes, then Kentucky wins this game 10 times out of 10. Kentucky had more dudes than Kansas State had.
Well, I think I want to give a lot of credit to K-State because I thought once they got punched in the mouth, their defense tightened up. They made life hard on Kentucky. Every drive they were ripping. And honestly, it's to their credit because most of them should have been fouls. Like I shared a picture of late in the game, Kason Wallace going for a drive, and Desi Seals is literally grabbing his arm, and they called it out of bounds on Kason. The refs were awful in this game. Like they were terrible. Did not get Kentucky beat, not making excuses, but they were fucking awful. One of them were more worried apparently about looking at Coach Cal than doing his job. But Kansas State's defense was tremendous in this game, and they made the plays that mattered, as I mentioned just a little bit ago. They ran in transition, got a couple easy buckets when Kentucky was trying to scramble back with sprinting. That helped out a lot. Their defense, hitting shots. And you know what? I thought Kentucky played well in this game. They played well enough to win this game. But at the end of the day, when you have 2 All-Americans in Keontae Johnson and Marcus Noel, sometimes they're just going to make plays. Like, I thought those shots they hit, they could not have been defended any better than what they did. And I thought for the people who are still the whole Coach Cal did this, I thought Cal called a pretty good game. He had a moment or two where lineups in the end of the first half were a little wonky, not a lot of scoring that allowed K-State to go on a run. But Kentucky came out in the second half, adjusted their trap defense on Noel, was a little better, and I thought Cal called a pretty good game. So he can't get out there and hit shots for him. You know, when you get 25 points and 18 rebounds from Oscar Tshiebwe, Chris Livingston gives you 11 points, and Kason Wallace was tremendous, 21 points in this game. You needed one other guy, and that's usually Reeves or Toppin, and they go a combined 2 of 22 from the field. That's how you lose games like this. But it was an incredible game. The people were like, oh, Cal can't. I thought he did a pretty good job yesterday. But at the end of the day, a couple missed foul calls, and K-State have dudes who made plays. It was an incredible game. We can talk about Kentucky. Did they underperform this season? 100%. Top 5 preseason team that we all thought could get to the Final Four, win a national title. They underperformed all year. Roster building was not great. The offense, even though it was effective at the end of the year, still you only had one shooter on the floor at a time, basically. We can criticize Cal for all that. But I thought down the stretch, the last couple games of the year, I thought from an X's and O's standpoint, Cal was pretty good. So you have to be fair with your criticisms. Yes, people are, piling on him now, and that's fine. Roster construction, lack of tournament success, all that. But X's and O's, I thought he called a fucking good game yesterday.
Yeah, no, I didn't think he was necessarily like out-coached by any means. You mentioned how well Kason Wallace played, but the crucial aspect of just looking at the box score was the turnovers. Oscar struggled in the first half mostly. I don't think he really turned the ball over much in the second half. I want to say he had 4 in the first half. Kason struggled a little more in the second half, but a lot of them were just kind of in key moments of the game where you needed to make sure you got a bucket. Oscar had a crucial one near the end of the first half. Chris Livingston only had 2, but he had kind of a weird one with, I want to say, about like 3 minutes to go in the game. So the turnovers kind of bit you guys in the ass, but again, Marquise Noel down the stretch, he was hitting crazy fucking threes. He had that sequence at the end of the first half where he had like a behind the back pass, a through the legs pass, and then an alley-oop on 3 straight possessions. Like he was just awesome, and that's what it came down to, making some plays at the end. The one really bad call was the one where Noah was clearly trying to pass.
Yep, and
on that play, and they called it a shooting foul. I agree with, and did it cost Kentucky the game? Probably not, but it was a pretty crucial moment, about 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go, where they end up getting 2 free throw shots that it should have been them just taking the ball out on the sideline. So, I mean, didn't cost them the game, but still, iffy officiating down the stretch for sure.
Yeah, and the officiating's got to be. Even our friend John Adams live tweets during the game, and he's like, "Oh, these are bad. These are not good." So, but hats off K-State. Incredible season they're having. They're going back to the Garden to play Michigan State. Kentucky, not the season we all hope for in Big Blue Nation. Got the talented recruiting class coming in. Need to get guys. If I had my pick of 3 dudes to come back next year for that roster that fits that roster perfect, give me Antonio Reeves, Chris Livingston, and either a combination of Damian Collins and Jacob Toppin. You give me those 3 with the incoming guys we got, maybe out of transfer portal big. I think Kentucky's ready to roll next year. Now, it's not what BBN wants to hear, and it's the hype and all that shit, but I think next year's team's got the potential to be – I think they got potential. We talk about guard play. I don't think guard play is going to be an issue next year for Kentucky, but all credit to K-State. Moving on to Sweet 16, Jerome Tang's first year. Disappointing end of the season for the Cats, Kentucky Cats, but nonetheless, K-State moving on. Phil, what other round of 32 game do you want to talk about?
San Diego State and Furman was another. It wasn't really a great game, but we sort of mentioned it earlier. It was one of the games I worked yesterday, so I was sort of locked in watching it. And San Diego State, again, you mentioned it at the end of your sort of statements about the Charleston game, but like Charleston didn't see anybody nearly as physical as San Diego State all year. And I thought that same thing came into play in that Furman game, where just San Diego State's physicality got them completely out of their game. They couldn't shoot the ball well. Furman's a team that normally scores like 80 points a game. Was down in what did they finish in the 50s?
Who? Furman? 52.
Yeah, 50. That's what I thought. Couldn't remember if they even ended up getting into the 50s at the end of that one. But yeah, that one was a tough break for Furman. But San Diego State, I'm really excited for that Alabama game. We'll see if Brandon Miller is healthy with the groin.
No, I mean, I'm right there with you. San Diego State's defensively, they can pose problems for Alabama. That would be a fun one. Creighton over Baylor, 85-76, and it was pretty comfortable. Like, it was close at times, but I don't think there was ever a point in that game, especially in the second half, where I felt like Creighton was in danger of losing this one. I think that says a lot about how good Creighton is finally back to being. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. I kind of thought if Creighton was gonna win this one the way that they wanted, it would be because of Kalkbrenner dominating down low. Just Baylor not being really able to match the size. But honestly, it was Creighton's guards. Nemhard had a great game. Baylor's guards just couldn't match Creighton's guards, which is not the way that I would have predicted this one to go. So definitely
30
surprised.
points for Nemhard.
Not surprised by the outcome, but kind of just surprised by the way it played out.
Yeah, 30 points for Ryan Nembhard in this game. They got 9. We talk about Creighton's lack of depth on the bench. They got 3 threes from Farabello off the bench for 9 points. The rest of the supporting cast was good. Kalkbrenner, 10.7 boards. Kaluma, 11.7 boards. Shireman, 8.7 boards, 3 assists, kind of what he's been his role this year. Cryer got 30 as well for Baylor. But yeah, I was disappointed in Baylor's guards. This should have been a lot better game than what it was, and it ended up not being. But I think that's a lot of credit to Creighton. I think they're starting to figure some shit out, and that's dangerous for the rest of the teams in the Sweet 16. Let's go down real quick. Princeton moves on to the Sweet 16. They dominated Missouri in this game. This wasn't really that close. Like, they spread Missouri out, back cut them, hit threes. Missouri wasn't in this game, really. Princeton wins 78-63. That was very comfortable for Princeton.
Yeah, and that was kind of what we've seen out of Missouri this year, though, is like when they've been, competitive, been very competitive. I feel like, I just repeat myself and say this a lot, but it's been the story of a lot of teams this year, just inconsistency. And Missouri, when they weren't scoring, weren't playing up tempo, scoring 75, 80 points a game, kind of struggled. So them only scoring 63 was definitely a recipe to beat them. But I don't think anybody had Providence, obviously, even beating Arizona, let alone pulling off the second upset. I believe the first Ivy League school ever to advance to the Sweet 16.
Yep. No, second. Cornell did it back in 2010 because they ended up playing Kentucky and Syracuse. So the second, but no, it's an incredible accomplishment. Princeton, I heard a great line, and I think that's true. I like this Missouri team, but Princeton wasn't that overmatched. Like, if you played these guys 10 times, I think they split it 5-5. I think they were pretty even as far as talent, the way they play. Maybe not talent. That's not fair. Missouri had more talent, but as far as styles of play, I think Princeton could win at least 4 or 5 of those games in a 10-game series. Phil, the most surprising result in the second round to me, and they were the higher seed as far as our lower seed, however you want to say that. I'm always confused by that. But Tennessee moved to the Sweet 16, beating Duke 65-52. And it's not because Tennessee doesn't have talent, but they lost their starting point guard. They did not look good at the end of the year. We've talked about them all year. And their defense carried them against a young Duke team who looked like a team poised to make another Final Four. That's the most surprising result in the whole second round to me. Talk to me about that real quick, because I did not expect Tennessee, a team who cannot shoot, to hit 9 3-point shots in this game.
No, I mean, we were sort of wondering, and we talked about it last week, where the scoring was going to come from. And then you get 27 points out of, I'm going to butcher this game name, but Nkamwa?
Nkamwa.
Nkamwa. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get 27 points out of him. And I know he was a double-digit scorer, I think, on the year. I want to say he averaged like 11 points a game, 10 points a game.
Yeah, he turned it on down the stretch. He became like their kind of go-to guy.
But I don't think anybody expected him to go for 27. And then obviously Vescovi was great. But their defense just locked in down the stretch. I mean, Duke couldn't buy a bucket. And then Duke's obviously lack of depth bit them in the ass too. They really only had the 5 starters that they were able to play. Grandison came off the bench but contributed absolutely nothing. Derek Lively plays 36 minutes but has no points. So it's just like Duke just couldn't. They ended up being the team that couldn't find the offense in this one, despite playing pretty well defensively themselves.
And I know I've seen a lot of Duke fans on Twitter after the game frustrated with how physical Tennessee was allowed to be, especially Placevic. You know what? Welcome to the party, because us in SEC country have to deal with that shit every year, and you kind of got a dose of it.
He hit Filipowski with that elbow to the sternum like 5 minutes into the game. He cut him under the eye at one point, but Yeah, he hit him with this, like, it was completely after the rebound. I don't even know what the fuck it was. And he just elbowed him right in the sternum. And Filipowski gave him this, like, what the fuck look as he fell
Yep.
to the ground. It was
Well,
brutal, man.
they were upset. And yes, a lot of those should be foul calls. But in the tournament, when apparently officials are going to let you beat the hell of each other, if you don't fight Tennessee back, they are going to physically assault you.
Well, and we talked about it earlier in the year with Tennessee and a couple other teams where they're going to play that style where we'll foul you every time down the fucking floor because they're not going to call it every time. They're
Yep.
just not going to call it every time.
Sorry, real quick. I was going to say, in Duke's, I think youth kind of caught up to them in that situation because they needed grown men to fight physically if they had to fight Tennessee back. And the ACC didn't prepare them because the ACC is kind of a finesse league. And so I don't think that they were prepared for it.
I agree. And even Duke, as good as they were defensively down the stretch, it was never really about physicality for them. It's more about, like I mentioned earlier, their length, their athleticism, Lively being able to change so many shots around the rim. So I kind of anticipated Tennessee losing in the first round to Louisiana, but this was exactly the kind of matchup that Duke was going to struggle with because you just mentioned it. A team that plays physical, has a lot of veteran, just grown ass men that can just beat you up for 40 minutes. Duke wasn't going to respond well to that.
Got to give Tennessee a lot of credit. We didn't have them here, but they're in the Sweet 16. The other one, real quick, in the second round, we got to touch on. Sorry, Peyton, but Arkansas. I called this last week. I had it in my bracket. I called it. I said Arkansas was a bad matchup for Kansas. Kansas had every opportunity to win this game, but Arkansas's defense locked in when they needed to. Devo Davis went absolutely nutty in this ball game. 25 points, 9 of 15 from the field. Only the one three-pointer. Arkansas shot terrible from the three-point line, too. 3 of 15, but that's not their game. They are a downhill driving team, use their defense, rely on their athleticism, and this came up huge against Kansas. Arkansas takes down the defending champs 72-71. Phil, your initial reactions after this ball game.
Yeah, I thought Arkansas definitely, was a bad matchup. They're probably the 1, 8, or 9 seed that no 1 seed wanted to draw in their region. And really want to give credit to Jordan Walsh, how he defended Jalen Wilson down the stretch. I thought was a big factor in the game. But just muted myself. Arkansas just you mentioned it. They ended up, they were able to get to the line. They go 21 for 26 from the line. Kansas still got to the line 25 times as well, but Arkansas was just a little bit more physical. And he's been to the Sweet 16 now, I think 4 times in 8 seasons as a head coach. I mean, at a certain point, you got to give Muss some credit.
No, and
Peyton mentioned it too, the Bill Self not being there.
We were getting ready to say the same thing. Yeah. Peyton mentioned it. Yeah, not having Self hurt because no offense to I just lost his name, their associate head coach.
Norm Roberts.
Norm Roberts, thank you. No offense to him, but he switched up the zone. Like Self wouldn't have done that. It's like Self, you would think in a 1 possession game would have drew something up. No
offense to Norm Roberts again, but it's like he's not some unproven assistant. Like he's a guy who's been a head coach and was not very successful. Again, not trying to shit on him, but like they needed Bill Self in that situation.
You're absolutely 100% right. But credit to Arkansas. Like you mentioned, the young guys are figuring out. Muss has been really good in the month of March. And, it is what it is for Kansas. They're going to have to reconstruct this roster, though, because Jalen Wilson's wonderful career has ended. Kevin McCullough's done. You would think Grady Dick. By the way, he only had 7 points in this game. I think Arkansas's length really bothered him in this game. He wasn't able to physically get a shot off a lot matchup, but credit to Arkansas. Kansas will, you always got to trust Bill Self. They'll get it figured out for next year. Phil, but let's move on to the Sweet 16. It is set. We're down to the final 16 teams remaining in the NCAA tournament. We'll go through these matchups real quick. We'll start at the top and work our way down. We've got 1 seeded Alabama playing 5 seed San Diego State. Contrasting styles. Alabama's finesse, gritty. They want to get up and down. They want to play fast and loose. San Diego State wants to grind this game to a halt. So at the end of the day, can San Diego State keep this low scoring enough to pull off the upset and knock out our remaining 1 seed, by the way? We had 2 1 seeds go out in the first weekend of action. So can San Diego State knock out the overall number 1 seed in the Sweet 16?
I think they can. Will they? I still pick Alabama, but a lot of this, as I mentioned earlier, will come down to Brandon Miller's health. He was scoreless in the first game. The groin's clearly bothering him a little bit, but I think they're asking him to sort of, lay back a little bit until they need him as well. I think Bama has too many offensive options in this one. San Diego State, other than Matt Bradley, doesn't really have anybody they can, consistently rely on. Darion Trammell is really, really good sometimes. And then, like he was in late in the Charleston game, he was great, but early in that game, he was awful. So I like Alabama in this one.
I'm with you. I think Alabama, we've talked about it, their biggest attribute, everybody looks at the scoring. This has been a defensive tournament. They've got the number 3 ranked defense of college basketball. I think they're okay playing a gritty game, and I think that they're going to do just enough. And at the end of the day, as long as he's healthy, they're going to have the best player on the floor. I like Alabama, but I like San Diego State. I like San Diego State keeping this very interesting till the end. The other one in that region, 6-seeded Creighton, 15-seeded Princeton. I think we're probably both in agreement here. It's been a fun ride for Princeton, but Creighton is just too big, too physical. They've got great guard play. I think Princeton may give them some issues early with the style of play, but if they don't hit a bunch of threes and make this real interesting at the end, I think Creighton runs away with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I sort of thought that the size issues would, obviously get him against Arizona, but Ryan Kalkbrenner is going to have a monster game in this one and carry Creighton. Creighton ends up being the team that we kind of thought they were. They have the rough regular season, but they're going to find themselves in that second weekend, possibly competing to go to the Final Four.
Well, speaking of, let's real quick, that Elite Eight matchup. We both have Bama, Creighton. That is a fun one because they match up a lot of ways. Length,
a lot of points scored in that one.
A lot of points scored. Can Creighton hit enough shots to knock out Alabama in Elite Eight?
If it's Ryan Nemhard, isn't it? I'm always going to get those two confused. Yeah. If Ryan Nemhard has 31 like he did yesterday, they'll beat Bama. But overall, I will say I'll pick Bama. But it's going to come down to the guard play. If Creighton gets guard play like they had yesterday, then they could easily win that game.
I think this is going to be one of the best games of the tournament if we end up getting this. Guard play is exactly what I was going to say. Because when Alabama loses, they don't get great games from Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears. When Creighton wins, they get great games from Ryan Nemhard, Baylor Scheinman. He got brought in for games like this, the transfer. His size can match up with Alabama well. Like, who's Alabama going to put on him?
The matchup I'm really excited to see is going to be Brandon Miller and Arthur Kaluma, too. Because
he's a dog.
He's a dog, and like Brandon Miller isn't a super athlete, but most of the time he's the best, maybe the only NBA athlete on the floor. Arthur Kaluma's an NBA athlete.
Oh, for sure.
That's a matchup to watch for sure. And then the guard for Creighton that we're not mentioning, Trey Alexander, he had a good game against Baylor. It's just been an absolute stud.
No, and you're right. And that's the thing. Creighton has these kind of wing guards who can match physicality with Alabama. And they're going to have a little size advantage as well because Sears and Quinterly are not the biggest guards. Trey Alexander's like what, 6'4", 6'5"?
6'4".
He's a big guard. And I think this is going to come down because I think Kalkbrenner and Bediako like neutralize. I think they're the same player in a lot of ways. I think Bediako is a better defender in a way.
I think Kalkbrenner's better offensively.
Exactly. But I think because of that, they're going to neutralize each other. This will be
fair.
This will be
the more we sort of got into talking about this matchup, though, the more I'm kind of almost selling myself that, like, holy shit, is Creighton going to pull this off?
Well, see, that's why, no offense to San Diego State Princeton, but I hope we get this in Elite Eight so we can figure it out. Let's move on real quick. The wild region here in the East, you got 9-seeded FAU, 4-seeded Tennessee in Madison Square Garden. Just my opinion, FAU is going to keep it close because they're going to score points. But at the end of the day, like we've mentioned, this is a defensive tournament. Tennessee's got the best defense of college basketball, and they're playing with a lot of confidence. And Kamwa, I don't know if FAU has somebody who can match up with his versatility. And you got to worry about Vescovi hitting a dagger three. I think Tennessee goes to the Elite Eight.
I do too. We talked about it with some of the other teams, just not having seen that physicality at that level. And I think FAU, as good as they are defensively and the way they pressure the ball and stuff, they just haven't seen a team as physical as Tennessee, and Tennessee is going to absolutely bully them. Like, if we thought Tennessee bullied Duke, they're going to do that times 5 to FAU.
In hindsight, and I'm glad for Dusty May, but this is the spot where I really wish Memphis was here, because the rivalry game, Madison Square Garden, and Memphis will play physical shit with you. That would have been a hell of a fun matchup. But
Absolutely.
I digress. Let's go to the other one. 3-seed Kansas State, 7-seed Michigan State. We didn't even mention Michigan State tuck out the Big East champs, regular season and conference champs, the 2-seed in this region, Marquette. In the second round,
shut down Tyler Kolek.
Shut him down. It's Mr. March, Tom Izzo. He's got his team playing well. And Phil, Kansas State's backcourt. We got the starting guards for both teams. Noel from New York City, and we got Jaden Atkins from New York City. Both gritty, tough guards. But I like how Michigan State's shooting the basketball right now. 50% from 3 down the stretch in the final month of the year. I think Izzo wins the coaching advantage. He will schematically design something to slow down Marcus Noel and make him have to shoot over length and give him problems. I just can't go against Izzo. I love this Kansas State team, but I think Izzo figures out a way to get to the Elite Eight.
I like Kansas State in this one. I think Marquise Noel is going to be the best player on the floor. I think, as I've mentioned before, generally that gives you the advantage in March, but then for me, the key to this one is Joey Hauser. If Joey Hauser plays like he did against Marquette, is able to, spread the floor a little bit, shoot from the outside, get to the free throw line, be an effective offensive threat, that just gives Michigan State a whole nother, kind of fold to their offense. But I like Kansas State in this one. I just think they're more versatile. They're, surprisingly maybe a little bit more athletic. I like K-State in this one.
So real quick, I'll give you another reason why I think Michigan State wins. They dominated Marquette on the backboard. Kansas State, as we've seen against Kentucky, not the biggest team, will struggle on the backboard. I think Michigan State wins by that particular area by double digits. And I think Matty Sissoko, he's more versatile than Oscar, will defend the pick and roll better with his length. I think that gives K-State problems. Plus, we didn't mention Tyson Walker has been freaking unbelievable right now. I like Michigan State. So that leaves me with Tennessee, Michigan State in the Elite Eight. Michigan State's the one team that we've talked about. Duke couldn't match the physicality. FAU, Louisiana. You ain't bullying Michigan State and Tom Izzo teams. They will thrive coming from the Big Ten in physicality. And if Tennessee can't get off with their physicality, Michigan State's going to outscore them. I like Michigan State pretty comfortable in this to go to the Final Four.
For a lot of the same reasons, I like Kansas State over Tennessee, but I just think at some point Tennessee's going to run into that game where they just have a complete offensive drought, and in a game against Kansas State that I do think will be close, it's going to come down to who can get a bucket. Kansas State has 2 or 3 guys who can go get them a bucket on a possession between Keontae Johnson, Marquise Noel, even Naquan Tomlin. So I like Kansas State going to the Final Four here.
Midwest, we got 1-seeded Houston against 5-seeded Miami. This will be a phenomenal game. Miami took out Indiana last night in the round of 32. Backcourt for Miami. The physicality size from Houston. Phil, who do you got in this one?
I'm going Houston in this one. Hopefully Marcus Sasser is just getting healthier. Jarris Walker against Norchad Omier is going to be a hell of a matchup, but I think Walker, the way he's able to spread the floor to the outside and just a little bit more athletic, he should have the advantage over Omier. I like Houston.
If Isaiah Wong plays like he did against Indiana, against Houston, I think Miami pulls the upset. But I think Houston's going to neutralize them. I'm with you. I got Houston. And then we got 3-seeded Xavier playing 2-seeded Texas. Xavier's learned how to play a little defense. Colby Jones, Sully Boom's playing well right now. But Texas hit a shit ton of threes against Colgate, the team that shot the three better than anybody in the country. Then they played another 3-point shooting team in Penn State and locked them down the final 4 minutes of that game, even though Penn State tried to make a comeback. I like this. I feel like Texas is the team of destiny right now. They're playing connected. They're playing well. And I just don't know if Xavier can keep pace. I've got Texas in this game.
Yeah, if Xavier had Zach Freemantle right now, I'd probably be picking them at this point to maybe go to the Final Four, potentially even as a national title contender. They were very impressive yesterday. Adam Kunkel was just fucking hitting like shots from crazy deep. Jack Nunge was really good, even though he got in foul trouble at the end of the game. I like Xavier in this one.
Interesting. I like the pick because they've learned how to play defense. I think a huge key in this, the way Dylan Dessou's been playing, go back to the Big 12 tournament, look at him in this first week in the NCAA tournament. He's putting up numbers, and I think he's a mismatch nightmare. So that leaves us with the Elite Eight. I've got Houston, Texas, the matchup everybody wanted when this bracket was revealed. I like Texas. I like their physicality. I like their guard play better than I like Houston's, especially if Sasser's not completely healthy. I think that Texas has more versatility than Houston, will play a game in the mud. And I like Texas going to the Final Four. I had it in the original bracket. I'm sticking with it. Texas over Houston.
I'm going against what my bracket actually has here, just the feeling I'm getting from the way these teams are playing right now, and I'm going Xavier over Houston. I think Houston has kind of struggled to score at times, outside of Sasser, they don't really have a consistent. I know, Shed scored here or there, Trayvon Marcus scored here or there, Walker has some offensive moments, but just Xavier between Sully Boom, Colby Jones, Adam Kunkel, Jack, there's just so many guys on that team that can score. I'm a little concerned about Xavier's depth right now. The free throw shooting is a little concerning too. They did not shoot free throws well yesterday, but I like Xavier.
And then real quick, down in the West, we got 8 seed Arkansas against 4 seed UConn. I think Arkansas makes it close because of their length, but the way Donovan Clingan and Adama Sanogo has been playing, and especially against Iona, I just don't think Arkansas has the big bodies that can match up. I think UConn moves through.
I'm with you. I think UConn's able to match up on the perimeter a little bit better as well too with Jordan Hawkins, Andre Jackson. They have some shooting as well, so I like UConn.
If UConn falls in love with the three-point shot again, though, and it's not going in, that's going to play to long rebounds. And Arkansas has got a dude in Devo Davis and Ricky Council that can get hot. So it's going to be interesting. And then 3 seed Gonzaga, 2 seed UCLA out in Las Vegas. It's the West Coast Showdown. UCLA just looks like a monster to me right now. Defensively, I think that they lock up Gonzaga. Gonzaga doesn't play a lick of defense. That's going to come back to bite them in the ass. I think they have the dudes that can match up with Timmy. I like UCLA in this.
I like Gonzaga. I think.
Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it.
I just think Timmy's going to have his way with.
No. What you've been saying for the last year and a half. I'm the residential Gonzaga defender.
I am the residential Gonzaga defender, but I think, well, Corey's not here, so I am the residential UCLA hater. Well, he's gone. Yeah. So both of those things come into play, but I think Drew Timme, Adam Bona isn't the kind of physical defender that's going to give Timme problems typically. I think in that UConn matchup, they'll eat Timme alive, and we'll get to that in a second, but I like Gonzaga to get through this one. If Jalen Clark was there and could help, shut down somebody like Straw there, I might like UCLA a little bit more, but I like Gonzaga with all their offensive options, and they're just rolling, scoring the ball right now.
And then that leaves in Elite Eight for me, UConn, UCLA. I'd still, there's something about UCLA. I think that they are smaller than UConn, but I think that they will bait UConn into taking a bunch of threes, do a well enough job on the bigs of UConn, and score more, because while they have to defend Clingan and Sanogo and all the bigs, UConn's bigs are also going to have to guard Jaime Jaquez, and he can pull them away from the rim and make life hell on them. And they have Tiger Campbell, maybe if not the best point guard. He is tournament experience. He's tough. I like UCLA going to the Final Four. I said it in the original bracket reveal. I'm sticking with it. UCLA over UConn.
Yeah, I had UConn going to the Final Four in my original one, and I'm sticking with that as well. You've mentioned it, and Peyton and pretty much everybody in the history of the world has mentioned that Timme doesn't play well against physical bigs.
Yeah.
UConn has 2 of them, not only Sanogo, but then Clingan coming off the bench. Again, Jordan Hawkins is an absolute stud. I can't think, and I don't have their roster in front of me for some reason, but the 2 white kids on UConn that shoot the fuck out of the ball. They got one of them's a freshman, Alex Caraban.
Caraban. And what's the other kid's name? I'll have to look it up here.
Great podcast material right here. Joey Calcaterra.
Calcaterra, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of his name.
Those two are, like you mentioned, they, like, the team in general can tend to fall in love with the three, but when those guys are knocking down threes, the offense is just so much more versatile. So if they're hitting shots, I think UConn's pretty much unbeatable in this game. And if Gonzaga is able to, defend them a little bit, maybe they can stay in it, but just UConn's way too physical.
I like it. It's going to be fun. This is where we start. The first two rounds are the most exciting, but as far as matchups go, where you start getting some of the best playing the best in a lot of cases, no offense, Princeton, but this is where tactically and basketball-wise, these are the fun ones, the real fun ones. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Sweet 16, Elite 8. We'll have the Final Four berths on the line this upcoming week. Before we get out of here, I mentioned Louisville real quick. What kind of week did they have? They're coming off a 4-win season. Their rival gets knocked out in the second round. And all they did this week is get ready to prepare to be a tournament team next year, because they get former Minnesota commitment, turn decommit, turn Louisville commit, 4-star Dennis Evans to fill in for the front court. They get Sky Clark, former Illinois player and former Kentucky commit, to come play in the backcourt for them. And they get a big-time commitment from our friends over at Combine Academy, 4-star wing Trenton Flowers, and he reclassifies to play with these guys next year. Louisville, they're in on Khalif Battle from Temple. If they can get L. Ellis back, I know Jalen Withers just decided today to transfer out, but it looks like Kenny and them, after a terrible season, are finally starting to put the pieces together like we thought they would in year one. Louisville's starting to hopefully build some stuff and build momentum. They had a great week this week, man.
Yeah, they did. I mean, the Sky Clark pickup, if he's, healthy and, mentally there, is great for them. Super excited to see Trenton Flowers. Obviously, I've seen him in person a couple of times. Very athletic, can shoot the ball. Curious to see. I just hadn't heard any reclassification talk from him. So I'm always nervous for guys reclassifying. Hopefully he's ready to make that next step. But if he is, like I said, he's absolutely ready. So I'll be excited to see. Kenny's got to do something next year, though. Like, somebody posted the other day, they were like, if Tobin Anderson was the coach of Louisville this year, how many games do they win? And I was like, it's hands down more than 4. So, the talent that he's starting to get in there is, speaking for itself. Peyton mentioned down here Jamison Battle. I think that's who he's talking about. He said Battle retweeted Sky's commitment post, and Jamison Battle from Minnesota is now in the transfer portal.
That'd be a great pickup.
Jamison Battle, I would love for Illinois to get him. He's one of the teams that they're supposedly has put interest in, so we'll see. But huge week for Louisville.
Yeah, big time week. We'll see. I think for basketball, Louisville needs to be in the conversation again. Like, we need our big time teams and programs to be in the conversation. This is a great building block to try to turn things around next year. They're going to have more talent, it appears. So good on Louisville. They're big winners this week without even playing a tournament game. But the big winners are all of us getting to watch the Sweet 16 this upcoming week. We appreciate you guys tuning in or listening to this podcast whenever you tune in to get you ready for the Sweet 16 on Thursday night. It's a lot of fun. The season's winding down, but we're about to have some big games. When we talk to you next time, we'll have the Final Four set, and we'll be on the road to Houston. So when we tune back in on episode 147, we're going to talk all about the Final Four, baby. But until then, for Phil, for Peyton, who couldn't be here, for Corey, who couldn't be here, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Everything College Basketball Podcast. And until the road to the Final Four next week, we'll catch you down the road.